Hey, how'd you get in here? Oh, I forgot you were invited. My name's Dan Simmons, and my guess is you probably don't know me unless you've read one of my 27 books. Those include the Hyperion Cantos and Carrying Comfort, and the New York Times bestseller, The Terror, and my last book that came out last year, Drood. Today I'd like to tell you about a new novel of mine that will be published in February 2010 from Reagan Arthur Books, an imprint of Little Brown and Company, and the book's called Black Hills. Black Hills is about the geographic Black Hills in South Dakota, but it's also about a young Sioux boy named Pahasapa, which is Lakota for Black Hills. Chapter 1, Along the Greasy Grass, June 1876. Pahasapa pulls his hand back sharply, but not before he feels the rattlesnake strike shock of the dying Wasakun's ghost leaping into his fingers and flowing up his arm and into his chest. The boy lurches back in horror as the ghost burns its way up through his veins and bones like so much surging venom. The Wasakun's spirit scalds a painful path through the nerves of Pahasapa's shoulder and then pours out into his chest and throat, roiling and churning like an oily, thick smoke. Pahasapa can taste it, and it tastes like death. Let me give a little context to what I just read. The summer of 1876 is a strong clue because we're at what the Wasakun, the fat takers or white people, later called the Battle of the Little Bighorn. But the Cheyenne and Sioux called it the rubbing out of long hair at the Greasy Grass. And long hair was, of course, General George Armstrong Custer. And my protagonist, Pahasapa, young Black Hills, hasn't quite turned 11 years old. He's 10 years old. He's not there as a warrior at the Battle of the Little Bighorn. Young Pahasapa wants to be a holy man when he grows up, a shaman for the Sioux, who call themselves the natural free human beings. But he's at this great gathering, one of the largest gatherings of the Plains Indians in American history, to study with Sitting Bull and others to be a holy man. And when the white people attack the camp of about 8,000 Indians, and Custer is attacking, young Pahasapa, even though he has no plans at all to be a warrior, gets caught up in the moment, and he decides to count coup on one of these Wasakun. Counting coup was the ultimate act of courage, and it didn't involve harming anyone. It meant rushing at an enemy and touching that enemy, either with a bare hand or with a coup stick, just for that purpose. But of course, young Pahasapa doesn't have a coup stick. So he rides with the actual warriors into the dust and the gunfire and the confusion and chaos of the Battle of the Little Bighorn, and he chooses one Wasakun, one fat taker, one white soldier to count coup on, and rushes forward and touches that soldier at the instant that soldier is killed. But, as we said, the soldier's long hair, General George Armstrong Custer. And when Pahasapa touches General Custer at the moment of Custer's death, he feels General Custer's ghost, or at least he thinks he feels this. He feels General Custer's ghost flow into his hand, and from his hand into his arm, and from his arm into his chest, and in his chest, Longhair's ghost flows into his heart, and from his heart, the ghost flows up behind his eyes and into his mind, where Pahasapa fully believes the ghost of General Custer will stay with him for decades to come. And that ghost will be with Pahasapa later that same year when Pahasapa goes into the sacred Black Hills on what the natural free human beings call Humblachea. Humblachea is vision quest. And during that vision quest, Pahasapa has a dream of 4 great stone heads rising out of the Black Hills, and beneath those stone heads, 4 great stone bodies. And these are the Wasakun, bodies of the white men as stone giants, who wipe out the natural free human being's way of life. So he sees forward into time during this vision, and Pahasapa sees the death of the buffalo by the thousands. And with the death of the buffalo, he sees the death of his own people's culture. And he sees further forward than that. He sees forward to 1893, when he, Pahasapa, will be playing an Indian in Buffalo Bill's Wild West show at the 1893 World's Fair in Chicago. And during all this time, the ghost of Custer is with him. Through the 1930s and the Dust Bowl that almost obliterates the entire American West, until, in 1936, Pahasapa goes to work with the great sculptor Gutzen Borglum, who's busy carving a mountain, which happens to be the most sacred mountain to the Sioux in the entire Black Hills, the Six Grandfathers. He's carving that mountain into the likeness of 4 Wasakun heads, the 4 American presidents. And he hires Pahasapa as chief dynamiter. And so it goes until on August 30th, 1936, on the day that President Franklin Delano Roosevelt comes to Mount Rushmore to watch the unveiling of the Thomas Jefferson head, Pahasapa is in position with the dynamites, and in one act can reclaim his people's legacy and end the threat of the Wasakun stone giants forever. The book is Black Hills by Dan Simmons.